Good morning. So, I'm on the back porch this time, but I missed you guys yesterday. I woke up late. We had a bunch of stuff to do, and I just didn't get to come on here and talk about the book with you guys. And then it's like, I don't know, 10 o'clock or something, and I had an appointment to get to this morning, so I was trying to rush to get to that and then hurry up and get home. So by the time you get to watch it, it's going to be more of like an afternoon, but it's whatever. So yesterday we were going to talk about chapter 2 of forest bathing, and then today I was supposed to answer some of the questions, but I don't have any questions, so we'll just talk about the book today. So with chapter 2 on forest bathing, he talked about how to practice Shinrin Yokyu something, the forest bathing. So he started off talking about how, he does a lot of studies and statistics and numbers, so I won't go into too much detail with all the statistics, but if you're curious as to the details of that, you can actually read the book. If you haven't done that yet. But he talks about leaving all of your cell phones and your cameras, any kind of distraction at home. Just go to the forest and just have like no specific plan, just to kind of like walk aimlessly, just let yourself take you where you need to go. And he also talks about just how you can use all of your senses to take in the forest, and how those different ways that you can use your senses actually can help heal you. He talks about at the end of the chapter, he starts talking about some people, how they believe there's more than just the 5 senses. He talks about 6. So there's the hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and then he talks about more of a finding joy, happiness, kind of like a more spiritual soul kind of sense. But just he talked about the hearing, how you can just go out and you want it to be silent of urban noise, meaning, try to get it far away from cars and buildings and alarms and sirens and things of that. And he did mention that when you get into nature, you're going to eliminate urban noise, but you will also start hearing the more natural sounds, like birds and the wind and the leaves and water. And he does go into detail about how all of that does help you mentally. Just real quick, with the hearing, he talks about how you need to slow down, take it in, and how it can. He mentioned about some of the things. My screen just went off on the camera. Cool story. Yeah. All right. But he talked about how some of the effects that urban noise can have on our hearing, which one of the big ones was hearing loss. So he talked about how when you're in nature, you don't have all of that loudness, and how it can help soothe you. He talked about how when you use seeing, your sight senses, he used a word called kimobi, something, and he said a rough English translation was dabbling sunlight. So he talks about how the light and the colors have an effect on our stress levels. So he talked about the blue light that's emitted from our phones and our screens, and how that's kind of like an artificial light, and it can cause that term we talked about last time, which was techno stress. He talked about that in the first couple chapters, or the introduction in chapter 1. He talked about the techno stress. So he talked about how the colors blue and green, they're in the forest, and nature, and how those two colors help lessen our stress. I know that he talks about blue and then the blue light, but blue light is different than the actual color blue. So we're talking about two separate things there, but he did talk about how artificial light can cause more discomfort, whereas the blues and greens of the natural world actually helps lessen your stress. He talked about how like when you've got your buildings and your skyscrapers and they're all gray can kind of cause more of a sense of unhappiness. And then he talked about the patterns in nature. Fractals is what he had said that they are technically called, and that's like the things that are on seashells. And he talking about how the trees grow up, and then it branches into 2 branches, and then those branches go into 2 branches, and then that goes into 2. It's like a repeating pattern, and how if there was a study done, you'd have to read the book to figure out, I think it was the study out in Oregon, where whenever you're looking at those patterns and whatnot, they kind of help reduce stress by like 60%. Also, he talked about smelling. So he went in and talked about how you can smell the forest, going into the forest, or using aromatherapy, the essential oils from the trees and the leaves and flowers, and talked about how all of that can help. Different oils and smells and trees and flowers all have different effects. He talked about how the oils go into the soil, and then once it rains, those oils are released, and that's why you smell real earthy whenever it rains, depending on what type of trees you're around and all of that. And he goes into more detail on all of that. And then he also talked about touching, about how you can feel the electrons through the ground if you walk barefoot. And he goes into talking about how your shoes, the rubber on your shoes is blocking that, so you're not able to connect with the earth and the electrons. And where if you have like leather shoes or wood shoes or whatever, then you're able to connect and get the energy from the earth that way. And he talked about different ways you can connect with the earth. You can go barefoot, you can hug a tree, you can do all kinds of different things. And then he also talked about taste, which was, he specifically talked about tea because he's from Japan, and it's a ceremony that they do at the end of their forest bathing walks, is where they take flowers or leaves from the forest that you had just walked through, and they brew a tea, and then you drink it, so you can take in the forest through that way. He also talked about foraging for food, which he also, and I recommend that you don't pick something that if you don't know if it's edible or not. So yeah. And then he went into his sixth sense about finding joy and happiness. But altogether, he was talking about how you need to find out what it is that is different. Everybody has different ways to take in the forest and nature and absorb it. Like, I like waterfalls, I like the birds, And some people probably don't like the birds. Some people probably love to go barefoot. Some people don't. So you kind of have to test your different senses with different ways in nature, and the scenery that you have, and figure out what it is that works for you. He also mentioned doing like crafts and pottery and aromatherapy and all that. So so that was just like a quick review of that chapter. My thoughts on it is I loved it. Obviously, I chose the book, but he did mention how he recommends you going in to do a forest bathing for 4 hours. That is a long amount of time. He does recommend at least just 2 hours, because then you can really feel the effects of it. But he said if you just got 20 minutes, you can tell the feeling from that in just 20 minutes. He said if you're really needing it, he recommended doing a 3-day, 2-night stay in the forest, which if you remember back in December, Trey and I took a trip. It was a like an end of the year trip to where we can just go, and like Trey called it like a whole body reset. We did, when we chose to go, it was in the middle of winter, so we did stay in a cabin, but we chose an off-grid cabin, so there was one plug-in that had one lamp in it. There was no, heat or running water. There was none of that, so it was more, we were able to connect on a deeper level with nature than it was if we just stayed in, a cabin that had a TV and a pool table and all of that. So we really did like that, and it was a really good trip. We did stay Friday night and Saturday night, came home on Sunday, but we after we checked out on Sunday, we ended up going and hiking half the day up a natural bridge, and it was amazing. Before we went, I was really just stressed and depressed and just felt overwhelmed with all kinds of stuff going on at home and at work, and it was very much needed. So with this chapter too, he had mentioned that you should maybe write down and take mental notes or actual notes of your emotional health and mental health and stuff before you do it, and then take notes afterwards. So I think I'm going to try and start doing that more. We do have a lot of plans for camping this year, so hopefully we can use those times to go and just kind of take a walk, sit down in the forest and do all of that. But we are past our 10-minute mark. We're coming up on our 15. But just let me know what you think of the book now that you're kind of getting more into the book, more deeper into the book. And now that he has went into more detail and had more statistics and studies done about how it affects your health and whatnot when you're doing a forest bathing, let me know if you are gonna go do it. Maybe try to write down your before and afters. If you wouldn't care to share that, let me know. And yeah, so stay natural, get out in nature, go do a forest bathe or something. Next week we'll do these on Monday, so I'll come back on here next Monday and we'll finish the book, so chapters 3 and 4, and then we'll be done with that book and choose another book. So stay natural, get out in nature, and I'll see you guys in the morning.